The interstellar trade hub of Virella was never silent. It was a city of light and sound, a floating marketplace in the void of space. Ships from every corner of the galaxy docked here, bringing rare metals, exotic creatures, strange foods, and technology older than some civilizations. Traders shouted prices in many languages. The smell of hot spices mixed with the scent of alien flowers that grew in special glass gardens. Elias Vance had seen all this before. He was a cargo pilot, a human who carried goods between far-off worlds. He had no reason to stop at the Central Plaza today, except for curiosity. A large crowd had gathered, and in Virella, a crowd usually meant something unusual. At the center of the plaza was a raised platform. A tall alien with deep blue skin stood behind a crystal podium. He was the auctioneer, and his voice carried through the noise. "Lot 37, he announced. "Special guardianship rights for the Wild One." Two guards stepped forward, and between them walked a girl. She was young, perhaps in her late teens by human measure, but she did not walk like a frightened child. Her steps were steady, her eyes sharp. Her hair, a deep silvery color, fell loosely over her shoulders. Her clothes were simple, worn, and marked with dirt from travel. She scanned the crowd, not with fear, but as if she were measuring each person. Some in the crowd shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. Others whispered to each other. "She's from Kareth Prime," a green-skinned trader muttered to his neighbor. "No, impossible. That world is sealed," the other replied. "They say no one comes out alive." The auctioneer tapped his podium. "By law of the Interstellar Council, an unregistered individual of unknown species must be assigned a guardian. This is not slavery, not ownership. The guardian will be responsible for her safety, her integration into society, and her actions." But his voice carried something unspoken, something like warning. A merchant in the front row raised a hand. "What's wrong with her? Why is she called the Wild One?" The auctioneer hesitated. "She is difficult to manage, strong, uncooperative. She does not speak much, and there have been incidents." Murmurs spread through the crowd. "Incidents?" someone asked. "Property damage," the auctioneer admitted. "She destroyed containment units twice, once with her bare hands." A ripple of unease moved through the watchers. The girl, this Wild One, stood still, her head high, eyes fixed, on no one in particular. She looked neither ashamed nor proud, only calm. The auctioneer started the bid low. "Guardianship rights begin at 200 credits." No one moved. 200? He repeated. "Anyone?" A few traders avoided his eyes. Others shook their heads. 100? Silence. 50? Still silence. The Wild One shifted slightly, as if she already knew the answer. A voice from the crowd laughed. "You'd have to pay me to take her." The auctioneer's mouth tightened. "If no guardian steps forward, she will be sent to Isolation Facility 7. People knew what that meant. Isolation was not cruel, but it was lonely. Years in a small station, watched by security drones, with no freedom and no chance for a normal life. The auctioneer glanced at the girl. "Last call. Anyone?" Elias had been watching quietly from the back. He didn't know why he stayed. Maybe it was the way she stood, like she refused to bend even when unwanted. Maybe it was the faint look in her eyes that wasn't anger, or fear, but something else. Something like tired defiance. Before he could think too much about it, he raised his hand. "I'll take her." The crowd turned. A human in a simple brown flight jacket, dark hair a little messy, stood calmly. He looked more like a man who had just walked in for supplies than someone making a bold choice. The auctioneer blinked. "You are volunteering?" "Yes," Elias said. "I'll be her guardian." Murmurs erupted again. Human? Are you crazy? Someone whispered. They don't scare easy, that's why, another said. The auctioneer tapped the podium. Very well. Guardian contract will be processed immediately. The guard stepped aside. The Wild One looked at Elias for the first time. Her eyes were an unusual shade, somewhere between gold and green. She studied him the way she had studied the others, but this time there was a flicker of curiosity. Elias walked to the platform. He signed the digital papers on the podium. The auctioneer's voice rang out. Lot 37 claimed. Transfer complete. When Elias turned to leave, the girl followed without a word. As they moved through the plaza, traders and merchants stepped aside. Some looked at him with pity, others with respect. The girl kept her eyes forward, walking with the same steady pace as before. They reached the docking bay. The air smelled of engine fuel and metal. Elias's ship, the Wayfarer's Promise, sat waiting, her silver hull catching the light from the station's glow panels. Elias turned to the girl. Name? He asked. She tilted her head slightly. None you need. All right, he said without pushing further. Then you can call me Elias, and that, he nodded at the ship, is home, at least for now. She looked at the vessel, then at him as if testing his words for truth. Without a sound, she stepped aboard. Inside, the ship was neat, but lived in. Elias motioned toward the small passenger cabin. You can take that one. Food's in the galley. Don't touch the control room unless I'm there. The girl didn't answer, but she walked into the cabin, glanced around, and sat on the edge of the bunk. Elias stood at the doorway for a moment, unsure if she was grateful, angry, or simply indifferent. But when he turned to leave, he thought. He heard her voice, soft, almost too quiet to catch. You didn't ask why no one wanted me. Elias paused. Would you have told me? Silence. He smiled faintly. Then we'll save that story for later. The ship's engines hummed too. Life. The Wayfarer's Promise drifted free from Varela's docking clamps, slipping into the darkness between the stars. And so the human pilot and the wild alien girl left the trade hub together, one because he had chosen to, the other because she had been chosen. Neither knew yet what that choice would cost them. The Wayfarer's Promise slid quietly through space, leaving the bright lights of Varela behind. Stars stretched across the black in a silent scatter of white. Inside, the ship's hum was steady, like a calm heartbeat. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, checking navigation screens. Their next stop was a small supply station 2 days away. He had taken countless trips like this, but this one felt different. For the first time, there was someone else aboard who wasn't cargo. The girl, still unnamed, sat in the passenger seat beside the window, knees drawn up, her gaze fixed on the endless dark. She had hardly spoken since leaving Varela. When Elias had offered her food earlier, she'd taken a small piece, chewed slowly, and set the rest aside. She seemed to eat only enough to keep going. You'll starve if you keep doing that, Elias said without looking up from the controls. I won't, she replied simply. Her voice was calm, not defensive. It was as if she didn't feel the need to explain anything more. Elias let it go. He wasn't the type to push people into talking. Still, he noticed things about her. How her eyes darted to the corners of the room when the engine changed pitch. How her hands tensed whenever the ship drifted through debris or static crackled in the speakers. She wasn't afraid. It was more like she was listening to something he couldn't hear. Hours passed in quiet. Elias adjusted their course while she remained near the window, watching the black ocean of space. At one point, the lights flickered for half a second. It was nothing unusual. Small ships often had power dips, but he glanced at her and saw her jaw tighten. You okay? He asked. Yes. Her answer was short, but her eyes were sharper now, scanning the ceiling panels as if the flicker meant something more. Later, Elias left the cockpit to make coffee in the galley. He returned to find her standing by the navigation console. She wasn't touching anything, just staring at the glowing symbols on the screen. "You fly ships?" Elias asked. Her eyes flicked to him, then back to the display. "Not like yours." "What's wrong with mine?" he said with a faint smile. "Nothing," she answered. Then, almost to herself, she added, "It hums at a safe frequency." Elias leaned on the doorframe. "You keep talking about the hum. You mean the engine noise?" "It's not noise," she said quietly. "It's a signal. This ship's hum is clean. No. Hidden pulse." Elias wasn't sure what to make of that, but he didn't interrupt. She seemed to notice details most people ignored. The first incident happened that night cycle. Elias had gone to his small bunk in the crew quarters, leaving her in the passenger cabin. The ship's hum lulled him toward sleep. But in the middle of the rest period, he woke to a strange feeling, like the air in the room had shifted. When he opened his eyes, she was standing there. She wasn't holding a weapon. She wasn't threatening him. She was just there, watching. Elias sat up slowly. "Something wrong." Her voice was low, urgent. "Danger." Elias frowned. "From what?" "Not from me," she said. "From outside. Something is following." Elias swung his legs over the side of the bed. "You're sure?" She nodded once. "You can't hear it, but I can." He grabbed his jacket and moved to the cockpit, the girl close behind. The navigation scanner showed nothing unusual at first glance, but when he switched to deep-range sweep, a faint blip appeared far behind them. It was moving at a matched speed. "Could be coincidence," Elias said, though his tone lacked certainty. "It's not," she said. "They've been close since we left Virella." Elias narrowed his eyes at the display. "Why would anyone follow you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her attention to the engine controls. Her fingers hovered over the settings, but didn't press anything. "Your ship's hum can hide us. I can change it." Elias studied her for a moment. "You're telling me you can modify my engine's frequency to fool their sensors?" "Yes," she said simply. There was no hesitation, no pride in her voice, just fact. Elias decided to trust her. He stepped aside. She moved with careful precision, adjusting settings in small, exact movements. The engine sound deepened, almost like a low musical note had been added. Elias checked the scanner again. Slowly, the blip faded from the display. "That should keep them from locking on," she said. Elias leaned back in the pilot's chair. "Not bad." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened slightly, as if the compliment registered somewhere deep. For the next day, the tension eased. She began to explore the ship quietly, never touching the control panels without permission, but running her hands over the metal walls as if learning the vessel's shape. Elias noticed she always returned to the cockpit when the ship drifted, through empty space. It was as though she felt safer there. Late on the second day, while Elias was checking cargo logs, she appeared beside him again. "They'll try again," she said. "You mean whoever was following us?" She nodded. "They want me." Elias met her gaze. "Why?" Her eyes flickered away. "Because I am not supposed to be here." "On this ship? In this part of the galaxy?" Her tone was so certain that Elias felt the weight behind her words. There was a story there, one she wasn't ready to tell. He didn't press. "We'll deal with it when it comes," he said. Her eyes returned to his. "Humans always say that." Elias smiled faintly. "And it usually works." She tilted her head as if considering the statement. "Maybe this time, too." They didn't speak much more after that, but when Elias turned in for the night, he noticed something different. The passenger cabin door was open a crack, and from inside, she sat awake, watching the stars. Not out of fear, out of readiness. The Wayfarer's Promise drifted through the cold black of space, its engines low and steady. For hours, nothing moved on the scanners. The blip from before was gone. Yet the girl, still without a name, watched the windows as if expecting shadows to appear between the stars. Elias sat in the pilot's chair, one hand on the controls, the other holding a mug of cooling coffee. "You've been staring for 2 hours," he said quietly. "Expecting someone?" Her gaze didn't move. "They don't always show themselves." "You mean the people who were following us?" "Yes." Her voice was calm, but her fingers gripped the armrest tightly. "They're patient hunters." Elias leaned back. "You keep saying they. Who are they?" She turned her head, meeting his eyes for a long moment. "If I tell you, you might change your mind about keeping me." Elias sipped his coffee. "I've already claimed you as my responsibility. Too late for me to change my mind." Her expression didn't soften, but her voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "They are called harvesters." The word carried weight, even if Elias didn't recognize it. "Never heard of them." "You wouldn't. They work in the dark places between mapped space. They take what they want: ships, cargo, people." Elias's jaw tightened. "Pirates?" "Worse," she said. "Pirates steal to sell. Harvesters steal to use." A faint chill ran through Elias. "And they want to use you?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes returned to the stars. "Yes." The silence that followed was heavy. Elias wanted to ask more, but before he could speak, the console flashed with a soft ping. Long-range sensors had caught something, a faint signature at the edge of detection. Elias adjusted the display. "Could be a freighter," he muttered. "It's them," she said instantly. "You're sure?" "I know the sound of their engines," she replied. The reading grew stronger. Whoever it was, they were gaining slowly, matching the Wayfarer's Promise's course. Elias tapped the comm switch. "We'll see if they want to talk." Static filled the cockpit for a few seconds before a voice cut through. It was deep, smooth, and without emotion. "Return the girl, or be erased." The voice faded back into static. No name, no threat display, just that single message. Elias's fingers hovered over the comm panel. "Friendly bunch." The girl turned toward him. "If we run in a straight line, they will catch us. Their ship is faster." "Then where do we go?" he asked. She studied the navigation map, pointing to a cluster of jagged symbols. "There." Elias zoomed in. "That's an asteroid field." "Yes," she said. "They won't follow us in. Too dangerous for a large ship." Elias raised an eyebrow. "And it's not dangerous for us?" Her eyes flicked to the controls. "If you trust me, no." He stared at her for a long second. Trust was a strange thing between them, built on almost nothing, yet somehow there. Finally, he pushed the throttle forward. The Wayfarer's Promise turned sharply, engines flaring as it headed toward the asteroid field. The harvesters followed. The asteroid field loomed ahead, giant rocks drifting in slow, deadly patterns. Some were the size of buildings, others no bigger than a man's fist. The ship's shields crackled as tiny fragments pinged against the hull. "Left," she said suddenly. Elias obeyed without question, sliding between two massive stones that rotated, slowly toward each other. The gap was narrow, too narrow for comfort. But they slipped through just as the rocks touched, scraping together with a deep, metallic groan. "Up," she ordered. He angled the ship upward, dodging a spinning shard of rock that would have torn. The hull open, Elias's hands moved quickly, but he realized something. She wasn't guessing, she was knowing. Every call she made was timed perfectly, as if she could see the path ahead before it happened. Behind them, the faint blip on the scanner hesitated at the edge of the field. The harvesters didn't follow. They stayed just beyond the drifting. Rocks, waiting. We're safe. For now, she said. Elias eased the throttle, guiding the ship deeper into the asteroid belt. The tension in his shoulders began to loosen. But then she swayed in her seat. "Hey," Elias said quickly. "You all right?" Her skin seemed pale, almost faintly glowing under the dim cockpit lights. "Using the path takes focus." "Path?" Elias repeated. She looked at him for the briefest second, her voice soft. "I see ways through the chaos, patterns. That's why they want me." Before he could ask more, her eyes fluttered closed and she slumped against the seat. Elias caught her before she fell to the floor. He carried her to the passenger cabin, laying her gently on the bunk. Her breathing was steady, but she didn't wake. Elias sat in the doorway for a long time, listening to the hum of the engines. He thought about the harvesters, about her strange abilities, about the way she had guided them through the asteroids as if reading a hidden map. Who was she really? And what did it mean that they were hunting her so desperately? When she stirred, hours later, Elias was still sitting there. "You stayed," she murmured. "Where else was I going to go?" he said lightly. She studied him for a moment. "Most people would have left me behind." "I'm not most people." A small, almost invisible smile touched her lips. "My name is Sarah." Elias nodded slowly. "Sarah. That's a start." She sat up, still pale but more focused now. "They won't stop. You should know that." Elias met her gaze. "Then we won't stop either." By the time the Wayfarer's promise drifted out the far side of the asteroid field, the harvester's blip was gone from the scanner. But Elias knew Sarah was right. They hadn't given up. They were just waiting for another chance. And for the first time, he realized something important. Taking Sarah at the auction wasn't just an unusual choice. It might have been the most dangerous decision of his life. The asteroid field fell behind them, but Elias kept the Wayfarer's promise on a winding course. Straight lines were easy to follow, and he didn't want to make things easy for the harvesters. Sarah sat in the co-pilot's seat, still a little, pale but alert. Her golden-green eyes followed every movement on the navigation screen. "They'll be back," she said quietly. Elias didn't look away from the controls. "I guessed that." "No," she said, leaning forward. "I mean soon." Before he could ask, the ship's proximity alarm began to beep. A small dot appeared on the scanner, moving fast, too fast for a freighter or patrol ship. "They found us," Elias muttered. A moment later, the comm crackled to life. The same cold voice filled the cockpit. "Human, return the girl. This is your last chance." Elias switched the comm to transmit. "She's not a thing to return." There was a short pause. Then the voice replied, "Then you will be erased." The transmission cut off, and a bright flash appeared on the scanner. Missiles. Elias pushed the throttle forward. The Wayfarer's promise shot ahead, its engines roaring. But the harvester's ship was bigger, faster, and armed. The missiles closed in. Elias swerved hard to the right, then cut power briefly, letting the missiles overshoot before bringing the engines back online. 2 missiles missed. One didn't. It exploded close enough to rattle the ship, sending a shudder through the hull. "Instruments holding," Elias said, though the warning lights were flashing on the control panel. Sarah's hands moved quickly over the secondary console. "They won't stop. We need to go where they can't follow." Elias glanced at her. "And where is that?" She pointed to the map. "The Mayalis Rift." Elias shook his head. "That's unstable space, gravity currents, electromagnetic storms." "They can't survive it," she interrupted. "But I can guide you through." The harvesters fired again. The missiles streaked toward them. "Fine," Elias said. "Show me the path." The Malus rift grew larger on the forward screen, a swirling band of distorted light, like a scar in space itself. Bright arcs of lightning leapt between invisible points, and shadows twisted in ways that made the eyes ache. Left, then down, Sarah said. Her voice was calm, precise. Elias followed her directions, diving toward a narrow gap between two glowing clouds of charged particles. The Wayfarer's promise shook as magnetic waves pushed against the hull. The harvesters hesitated at the edge of the rift. For a moment, Elias thought they might break off the chase, but instead, their ship plunged in after them. "They're following," Elias said. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then we must make it impossible." She moved her hands across the controls, altering the ship's energy output. The hum of the engines changed pitch, dropping into a deep, steady vibration. Elias noticed the scanner readings start to distort. "They can't get a clear lock on us?" "They can't even tell where we are," she said. "But neither can you, unless you trust me." Her words were sharper than before, almost like a challenge. They darted through the rift's twisted corridors. Gravity pulled at them in sudden bursts, trying to drag the ship sideways or flip it completely. Sarah called each movement before it happened. Sharp right, drop 2 degrees, hold, now climb. Elias obeyed, hands moving without hesitation. The ship groaned, but it stayed intact. Behind them, flashes of light marked the harvesters' struggle to keep up. Their larger vessel clipped an invisible gravity eddy, spinning wildly before correcting. It slowed, but didn't stop. "They're still coming," Elias said. "Not for long," Sarah replied. "Ahead, see that dark shape? That's a dead zone. No gravity, no light. We'll hide there." Elias angled the ship toward the shape, a void within the chaos, a patch of pure black surrounded by the rift's swirling storms. As soon as they crossed into it, the shaking stopped. Silence filled the cockpit. The harvester's ship appeared on the scanner, moving closer. Then it passed right by them, unable to detect the Wayfarer's promise in the darkness. They waited, in the dead zone, until the scanner showed nothing but empty space. Elias finally let out a long breath. "That was close," he said. Sarah nodded. "They'll search for us, but they won't risk the rift again so soon." Elias studied her. "You've done this before." Her eyes met his. "Yes." He waited, for her to say more, but she didn't. Instead, she turned her gaze to the rift's swirling storms beyond the window. Once they cleared the rift, the stars returned, steady, familiar points of light. Elias set the course toward the nearest neutral station, though he doubted it would be completely safe. In the quiet, Sarah finally spoke again. "You asked who they are. I told you their name, but not why." Elias kept his eyes on the stars. "I'm listening." "They hunt my kind," she said. "We have something they need, something that can open what should never be opened." Elias glanced at her. "And you?" "I am the last one they know of," she said simply. Silence settled again. Elias didn't know if her words meant she was truly the last of her species, or just the last in this part of space. But either way, it explained why the harvesters wouldn't stop. Hours later, as Elias prepared for the next jump, he caught Sarah watching him. Her expression was unreadable. "You didn't have to follow me into the rift," she said. "You didn't have to guide me out of it," Elias replied. A faint, almost reluctant smile touched her lips. "Maybe we're even now." Elias shook his head. "Not even close." Somewhere far behind them, the harvester's ship drifted back into safe space. They hadn't caught the human or the girl, but the hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The market square was quiet that morning, far too quiet for a place that usually rang with voices, traders, and clattering carts. Joran noticed it first as he and Kayla walked through the narrow streets toward the outer district. Her eyes moved, quickly from shadow to shadow, her sharp alien senses catching movements he couldn't see. Ever since their daring escape from the auction hall, the two had been lying low in the safe house of Mara, an old friend of Joran's. But Mara had warned them, the syndicate doesn't forgive. If they put a price on you, they will find you. And now, Joran could feel it. Something in the air felt tense. Kayla stopped suddenly, her hand brushing against his arm. "We're being followed," she whispered in her careful, accented words. Her voice was steady, but her golden eyes narrowed in alertness. Joran turned, slightly, pretending to look at a shop window. Sure enough, 3 figures were moving slowly through the crowd behind them, never getting too close, but never letting them out of sight. "We can't lead them back to Mara's," Joran said. "We need to lose them." Kayla glanced toward a side street and gave the faintest nod. "This way. I know these streets better than you think." They slipped into the alley, weaving between stacked crates and hanging laundry. The sounds of the marketplace grew fainter as they moved deeper into the maze of narrow lanes. But the footsteps behind them grew louder. "They're closing in," Joran muttered. Kayla didn't answer. She grabbed his hand and pulled him sharply to the right, ducking under a low archway and into a courtyard. In the center stood a fountain, its water green with age. She pointed toward an old crooked staircase at the far side. "Up!" she ordered. Joran didn't argue. They climbed quickly, their boots thudding against the worn wood. By the time they reached the rooftop, Joran could hear their pursuers entering the courtyard below. From up high, Kayla moved like she was born there, jumping narrow gaps between roofs, balancing on beams, never losing her speed. Joran followed, a little less gracefully, but refusing to fall behind. Finally, after crossing 3 rooftops, Kayla dropped into a hidden garden between 2 buildings. The place was quiet, overgrown with vines, and shielded from view. She crouched, low, and motioned for Joran to stay down. "They'll lose our trail here," she whispered. Joran sat against the wall, breathing hard. "You've done this before," he said, watching her with curiosity. Kayla gave a small shrug. "You survive by knowing how to vanish. That's what kept me alive before you came." There was no boast in her tone, just a simple fact. They stayed, hidden for nearly an hour until the sounds of searching faded away. Only then did Joran speak again. "Kayla, why didn't you just run when you had the chance? Back at the market, you could have disappeared on your own." Her golden eyes met his, and for the first time, there was a softness in them. "Because no one else placed a bid for me. No one else saw me as more than something to sell. You did." Joran didn't know what to say. His throat tightened. They made their way back to Mara's safe house as night fell. The sky was streaked with deep blue and orange, the last light fading behind the tall buildings. Inside, Mara was waiting with news. "You two need to leave the city," she said, her voice low. "I just heard the syndicate put a bounty on you, Joran, and Kayla. They doubled hers. Whoever catches you gets enough credits to live rich for years." Kayla didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. "Then we go," she said. Mara pulled out a folded map. "There's an old transport hub outside the eastern wall. Most of it's abandoned, but there's a trader I know who can smuggle you to the outer systems. It won't be comfortable and it won't be safe, but it's better than staying here." Joran looked at Kayla. "What do you think?" She nodded once. "We leave at dawn." That night, Joran couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the distant city lights and listening to the quiet breathing of Kayla across the room. The thought of leaving this planet for some unknown star didn't scare him. It was the thought of losing her that did. He didn't know how far the syndicate's reach went. He didn't know what dangers waited beyond the eastern wall, but he knew one thing for certain. They had come too far together to turn back now. When the first pale light of morning touched the sky, Joran woke Kayla and they slipped out into the sleeping streets. The city was still, the air cool and damp. Somewhere far away, a ship's horn echoed. They walked side by side, their footsteps soft against the cobblestones. Neither spoke, but both knew this might be their last quiet moment for a long time. As they reached the outer gates, Kayla glanced at Joran with a faint, almost hidden smile. "We will make it," she said simply. Joran smiled back, not because he believed it completely, but because he wanted to, and somewhere in the shadows behind them, unseen eyes were already watching. The wayfarer's promise floated silently in the shadow of a small gas giant. The stars blinked cold and distant, but inside the ship, the air felt heavier. Elias sat opposite Sarah in the cramped passenger cabin. For hours, she had stayed quiet, staring at the worn metal walls. Now, her hands rested on her knees, fingers tapping softly. "Tell me," Elias said gently. "Why are they chasing you? Why does it matter so much?" Sarah looked up slowly, eyes shining in the dim light. "You want the truth?" He nodded. She took a deep breath, her voice soft but steady. "I come from Kareth Prime." Elias blinked. The name was unfamiliar, but the way she said it made him sense its importance. "It is a world sealed off from the rest of the galaxy." "Why?" "Because it holds a power no one else understands. My people, we are born with a gift. When we reach a certain age, we can connect with the technology left behind by the ancients." Elias frowned. "Ancients?" Sarah's eyes grew distant. "They were the first beings to travel between stars. Their machines can change worlds, control energy that no one else can. But the technology is dangerous. The Council locked away my world to protect everyone. So the Harvesters want to use you to unlock that power?" "Yes," she paused, fingers tightening. "If they succeed, they could control weapons capable of destroying entire planets. They want me to open that door for them." Elias felt a chill. "And if you refuse, they won't stop. They'll hunt me until there is nothing left." He looked at her, really looked. The wildness was still there, the fierce independence, the fire in her eyes. But beneath it was something more fragile, a weight she carried alone. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Elias asked. "Because I didn't know if I could trust you." He smiled faintly. "You can." Sarah's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Maybe?" The ship's sensors beeped softly. Elias checked the display. The nearest station was just within reach, an old outpost that might have supplies and fuel. "We should stop there," he said. Sarah nodded. "But we must be careful. The Harvesters may have agents there." As the wayfarer's promise approached the station, Elias felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The outpost was quiet, its docking bays mostly empty. They landed without incident. Elias led the way inside, his hand close to the small energy pistol he carried. Not because he wanted to fight, but because the unknown always felt dangerous. Sarah moved beside him, alert and silent. Inside, the station was dim and dusty. Flickering, lights cast long shadows across cracked floors. A few figures moved in the distance, faces hidden beneath heavy cloaks. Elias spotted a small shop with signs in several languages. He moved toward it. Suddenly, a sharp voice called out, "Looking for something human?" A tall figure stepped forward. Their face was hidden under a hood, but the tone was cold, threatening. Elias raised his hands. "Just supplies." Sarah tensed. "We don't belong here." The figure laughed softly. "No one belongs anywhere anymore?" Elias exchanged a glance with Sarah. Something was wrong. Before they could react, more figures emerged from the shadows blocking the exits. "We know who you carry," the hooded leader said. "Hand her over and no one gets hurt." Elias stood firm. "She's not a thing to be handed over." The air grew tense. Sarah stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly. "Then you leave me no choice." Suddenly, Sarah's hands moved in a blur. A pulse of energy burst from her fingertips, hitting the ground and sending the attackers stumbling back. Elias grabbed her arm. "Easy! We don't want to fight here." She nodded reluctantly, lowering her hands. The leader snarled. "This isn't over." Elias and Sarah moved quickly to the ship. The station's alarms began to blare. They took off just as a group of armed pursuers entered the docking bay. Back in the safety of space, Elias looked at Sarah. "You're stronger than I imagined." She smiled faintly. "Stronger than I am, maybe." He shook his head. "You don't have to be alone anymore." Her eyes met his. "I'm beginning to believe that."